G'day folks, Jordan here today with a new computer video. We're going to take a look at a smaller tablet convertible laptop hybrid thing from the early 2000s. Bring in the Toshiba Portege M200. I would guess around 2004 is when this thing was made, as you'll soon see with some of the hardware that this thing has. This is a very small little tablet laptop thing, which I got for free from my school because they were going to throw it out, and I opted to collect a few of them. Of course, there's all the dead ones right up there. I actually got two working ones out of the pile, so if I move some crap out of the way off camera here, I will bring in the second one. Now, I would probably have used the second one, but it's currently needing some software work, and honestly, it's probably in a little better shape in some areas and worse shape in some others, but that's kind of par for the course for these things. But as you'll soon see, this little piece is missing, and this one's got the little sticky things covering the screws, but this one has a worse shaped lid, so go figure, right? Anyway, we're going to take a look at this one today, which I've refurbed in terms of its software side of things to demonstrate for you all, regardless, and so hopefully some of these things don't really bother people in the viewing audience. But anyway, let's move on to the rest of the overview, starting with the I/O, which this machine doesn't really have a whole heck of a lot of, as per usual. So these little two squares on the front, I presume are useful for the docking station, which this thing probably would have came with, so that way when you connected it up, you had a way to secure the laptop onto the docking station, which would give you more ports and probably a CD-ROM drive as well. On the front, we have an SD card slot, and it's just for SD, and it does have kind of a crucial purpose in this laptop, as you'll probably soon find out based on the software. We have a microphone jack, a headphone jack, and a typical Toshiba amenity, the analog volume control, which this laptop has. Many Toshiba laptops from the time period had one of these things equipped on them. In fact, I think all of them did in the early 2000s. I know they started to kind of slim that thing, that trend down as the late 2000s rolled around. I think they quit doing that in the like 2009, I think, or something like that, maybe a little bit earlier, like 07 or 08, but I know some machines in 07 probably still had this analog volume control thing. So if you ever find that your volume is really quiet on one of these things, even though in Windows it's turned all the way up, well, there's your culprit. I made that mistake all too many times. Now, fortunately, I do have a stylus to demonstrate on this machine, and we'll take a quick look at it here. It's just this little plastic thing with a little pen holder on it if you really want to. It's got a button out here on the very end, presumably to switch modes and supported software. I have no idea. I doubt it acts as an eraser as well if you were to put it on the screen. And you also have a button here, which sometimes can act as a right-click button depending on what you have it programmed to. And it just sits in there like so. There's one of two Kensington security lock slots on this machine. There's one on the other side. On the back, we have our DC in. Now, for those who find one of these things without the power supply, take note. These things have an unusually low voltage for a laptop. These use 15 volts center positive. So if you're looking for a power supply, that's one thing you need to watch out for, is that the voltage is a lot lower than a lot of Toshiba's later laptops, which used a 19 volt power supply. So I had to watch out on that one before I plugged in the wrong power adapter. And luckily I did have one in my collection, so I was able to power this thing on. There's two USB 2.0 ports. Those are the only two USB ports on the entire machine. There's a VGA port, there's a modem and an Ethernet port, and there is the vent, which is a rather decently sized vent too for something like this. And there's the other security lock slot there. There's an infrared data in and out port right here behind this lens. There is a Wi-Fi on and off switch. I don't believe that on models equipped with it this would control the Bluetooth, but I could be wrong. I know on Dells, if they have the Bluetooth equipped, they will turn off the Bluetooth through the same switch, but I don't know if this machine does that or not. This one does not have Bluetooth, and neither does that one there. And there is a card bus slot for Pcmcia cards. There's only one slot, so you can only have one Type 2, or I guess two Type 1s if those are supported, but I don't think so. I think Type 1 uses the same slot size. But yeah, only one Type 2 is supported in this machine. I think this is a plastic lid, but it could be wrong. It could also be some kind of a thin, lightweight metal probably like aluminum if I had to guess if that's what's on this thing, because I think it's painted, because I don't believe that this is plastic. It kind of, I mean, it could very well be plastic, but it certainly feels like metal to me. Wouldn't be surprised if it was plastic, wouldn't be surprised if it was metal. Somebody enlighten me in the comments section. Anyway, here's the inside. I believe this is a 12-inch 4x3 display with a resolution of 1400 by 1050. I don't know what the standard resolution for these things would have been. I believe they would have probably been a standard 1024 by 768. But this one, I don't know if it was a standard equipment option or if this was an upgraded panel, but this one has the 1400 by 1050 display. And I don't know what digitizer it has built into it. I have not bothered to look through the device manager yet until now, so I guess your guess will be as good as mine as to what this thing has in it. As you can see from the other machine, I'll actually open it back up here to show you guys. It's missing that little joystick thing there. Now, the joystick still works, it's just missing the cover, but just that's one thing to note between these two machines, just to kind of show. Anyway, as far as the stuff on the display is concerned, there's your power switch, and it is a locking power switch, so if you have it in tablet mode and you have the machine on, you can then lock the power switch so it won't accidentally get bumped when you're actually trying to use this machine, which is a very nice little add-on. Move this other one out of the way here again. We also have, like I mentioned, the joystick. We also have a couple of buttons there. The one with a key next to it is the typical Windows security button that is found on a bunch of tablet PCs or certain pieces of equipment that have limited access to the Control-Alt-Delete key command sometimes, and so some of them dedicate a button or a programmable button to act as the Control-Alt-Delete function in Windows. For the login especially, that's another place that that's useful for, hence the key. And then this button down there is supposed to act as display rotation or some kind of an X button. I'm not entirely sure if that's supposed to be strictly dedicated to screen rotation or display orientation locking. I have no idea. I haven't been able to get this one to work. I might have to reprogram it within Windows. Speaking of buttons, there are 4 tablet-specific buttons on the side of the display, which makes me glad I have the tablet stylus to actually show those to you. We'll get to that when we're in Windows. And then, of course, here is the little keyboard. This one's actually in fairly good condition. It's not really all that worn at all. The only real spot that you can see is just a smidge of wear on the space bar, but otherwise there's just the ever so slightest faint bit of possible wear on some of the more commonly used keys like W, R, maybe H, and definitely A and S. But otherwise, I mean, this thing is like gently used. Like I could barely see the wear on the keys, except for, of course, the obvious, which is the space bar. And of course, we have stickers for the obligatory Energy Star, as well as NVIDIA GeForce FX. This does have a discrete graphics card in it. And there are the Intel Pentium M and designed for Microsoft Windows XP stickers. This is actually a textured palm rest. I was actually really surprised to see this, but it is textured. And it apparently is really good at picking up stuff. I don't know if this is a painted plastic. I would assume that it is. Because the reason why I think this is because there's a little bit of a dent there and some of the paint is coming off on the corner there. And I don't know if it's actually a textured plastic or if the paint has that style of texture in it when it was professionally applied. Not too sure. Of course, as per usual, Toshibas have this piece of trim up above the keyboard where you can take this off, and then with the matter of taking out 2 screws, you can get access to the underside of the keyboard. And I had to do that for these 2 machines because for some reason, I don't know why this is, but for some reason, my school, for some reason, when they put these things into storage, they disconnected the keyboards from the motherboard. I don't know why they did this, but I tried turning one of these things on, and I, for the life of me, could not get it to work, either with an external peripheral or anything. And it didn't occur to me that they unplugged the keyboard until after I took off this trim and found out that it was disconnected. And I think it was this one I was experimenting with first. I was trying to get the keyboard reconnected. I broke the clip, but fortunately still clicked into place. But later I found out that how the proper operator. If I can put my thoughts into words, that might be really nice. Anyway, so the keyboard cable goes above the clip, which the clip goes underneath the connector and kind of just like holds it in place. kind of an interesting mechanism, let's just put it that way. So, yeah, it is what it is. So, now I'm going to go ahead and let's grab the stylus, and let's go ahead and power this thing on. Okay, hopefully there's not a lot of glare. I had to find some way to get this to show without glare, but that's just the nature of this display. Let's go and turn it on here. There's our BIOS, which is done in like a split second, which is ridiculously quick. And we're booting up Windows XP. This machine would have probably shipped new with XP Tablet PC Edition 2004, but this has 2005 installed, and that's what we'll be using for this video. And I found a good majority of all the original software that this thing probably would have came with when it was new. Some of it, admittedly, probably gimmicks more than anything, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, every laptop, especially nowadays, but back then, would have came with a bunch of stuff like that. There's one speaker. It sounds pretty bad. It's right there by the hinge. And yeah, it's pretty awful sounding, but hey, at least it has something for sound output. I never bothered to dismiss this prompt for the Welcome to Tablet PC thing for those who haven't seen this before. It'll kind of teach you how you use the pen and enter text into the tablet PC input panel down there. And it'll also show you interactive tours of stuff, which is pretty cool. This one does not have a finger-capable touchscreen. This is just a stylus, which is not the end of the world. It's about right for the time period. Because at this time, a capacitive touchscreen digitizer would have been a considerable expense, which I'm sure that Toshiba would have offered on a higher end model, but not this one. So the specs of this has a Pentium M 1.6 gigahertz. I don't remember what core this is based on. I know it's probably the generation before the Dothan Pentium M, so whatever generation that was, this probably has in it. And I upgraded the RAM slightly. This had 512 megabytes of RAM when it was new, but I did a slight bump to 768 megabytes of RAM because I had one stick lying around of 512 meg DDR, which is what this thing uses. So that's probably a dead giveaway that this is not a Dothan, because a Dothan Pentium M based laptop would have DDR2. But anyway, I already knew that. So let's go ahead and head into the properties here. So you can see things are really small on the screen, but that's because I'm running at the native resolution of 1400 by 1050. I'm sure that when you're actually trying to do some serious work on this and you need some precision, you could probably set the resolution a little lower, and I believe there is a setting for that on these little touchpad things here, so I'll show those to you now. So if I hover the pen over these pads, I'm not even touching them, I'm just hovering the stylus over them, and functions are popping up on the screen, as you can see. There's a control lock, there's a shift lock, 1024 by 768, and OneNote starting. I don't have Office 2003 installed or later, so I can't use the OneNote button, but I'm sure I could have used that as a function if I did. Now, I don't know what this 1024 by 768 button is supposed to do, because I tap on it and it doesn't actually change the resolution. I'm not sure what its intended function is to be, but I suppose you probably have to set that up yourself. And then shift lock and control lock are pretty self-explanatory. Those are obviously holding down control and shift on the keyboard, or at least the simulated keyboard. And then you can just tap it to release it. And I believe you can program these buttons individually to do whatever you want. I don't remember what program does that. I think it's down here where the tablet buttons are, or something to that nature, but I couldn't really tell you for sure. You can also turn the speaker on and off. You can turn off the screen, or you can change the screen orientation. And then there's properties as well, to where you can calibrate the stylus, whether or not you're right-handed or left-handed, whether you want the menus to be in right-hand or left-hand mode. You can also change the resolution, well, the resolution's right here, you idiot. But you can change the orientation of the display, the brightness of the display. You can also change the function of the hardware buttons, which are actually nicely photographed there. This, I believe, is done by Toshiba, so this is probably a Toshiba control panel. And there's pen options here for what the buttons on the pen and whatnot actually do. So double tap is a double click, a press and hold is a right click, the point and hover is just a point, obviously, and then the start input panel gesture is the input panel thing. And yes, you can use the top of the pen to erase. This has its own separate input thing. I didn't know that that was the case, but it actually does. So that is really useful for those programs which can take advantage of this. So as you can see, this is a GeForce FX Go 5200. This is the 32 meg version of this graphics card. So you can see 32 meg there. So this probably would not have support to run the Windows Aero environment. And the reason why I say this is because I used to own a Dell Latitude D800 that had the same FX Go 5200, but it was a 64 meg card. And it actually ran Windows Aero in Vista, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And I don't believe there's many drivers available for this thing to run Vista. It was supported, but to what extent I don't know. But I do believe that it did get Vista support for at least a brief period of time. Given how old this thing is, it makes sense, because obviously it would have been supported for at least another major OS release. But I don't know. I'd have to look at the support site. I don't have much installed on this thing as far as software is concerned. I just installed all of the ones that Toshiba had listed on their website, which is quite a bit. So if I come in here to this Symbol Commander, this is one of the programs that would have probably came with this computer when it was new. And what it allows you to do is to set custom gestures to certain functions in the computer. So for example, you could start launching email and search and do new documents, exit, save, and showing symbols and all that stuff. So for example, if you want to go search something on Google, you can then make this drawing with a question mark on it. What you do to do this is you hold down the button, you then bring the stylus close to the screen, and then as you'll see, it inverts the screen where the drawing is, and then as soon as you let go, it'll then perform its intended function. I didn't get it quite right. I'm going to try it again. Oops, if I can get it right. There you go. So then this will launch the default web browser and will take you to Google to perform your web searches. In this case, the default browser is Firefox, so this is going to take a little while. Oh no, it actually just launched as Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is probably the best tablet optimized browser other than Google Chrome. So both I have installed. I thought it was going to open Firefox, but I guess the default is still set to Internet Explorer, so it launches Internet Explorer as the default. There's some other functions from that same panel, so I believe if you draw a triangle, you can you get some cheesy sound effects to go along with it too. You can then launch Microsoft Journal by drawing a J, which as you can see launches Windows Journal. We'll come back to that. You can also launch this Ebook Reader thing if you type in E or draw an E. Although I don't believe I have it installed, so it's going to do absolutely nothing. I love that sound effect. It's so cheesy. And then it can also go do signature, which I believe is just as long. And it makes some funny sound effects there too. And there's some other gestures like rotating the display. So if you do like that, or you can do this. I'm sure everybody's going to get sick of that sound effect by the time I'm done with this. You can thank Toshiba for that. Let's see if the email one works. Oh, please enter your login and password. Fair enough. But I believe, yes, you can reprogram what some of these actually do. Like, for example, if you want to change the ebook reader to something else. Can you change that? Yes, you can change that. So yeah, since I don't have this set up, you can then change to whatever you want, and it will then do what you want it to do. And then you can also do a right click by just holding on the button and then tapping on the screen, and that performs the right click function as well. Now, it's not the only thing that came with this machine. There's some other things as well, such as, let's see here, the SD memory boot utility. Yes, this is another one of the functions that this thing would have came with, and apparently has an unexpected error. Probably because there's no SD card inserted, but that's okay. So what this machine has as far as its limitations are concerned is there's no optical drive, and there's no way for you to boot from a USB stick. And also the other kinds of boot options through either USB or the network are quite limited. Well, the network option is pretty self-explanatory. That's PXE booting. But everything else is basically very limited. And so Toshiba made this utility to go with this machine when it was new. So if you did want to boot an operating system on this machine other than the factory supplied Windows XP, or any version of Windows for that matter that would run on this machine, which is basically up to Windows 7, then you would use this utility to make an image, and the OS here, or this program in this case, would make it bootable, thus that the Toshiba BIOS would actually recognize it. Now, I am running a slightly older BIOS on this machine. Apparently it uninstalled itself. Nice. Anyway, this thing's running BIOS version 1.60, and the latest one for this is BIOS 1.80. And unfortunately, for some reason, I cannot get this thing to update its own BIOS because it keeps wanting it to be run as an administrator. But every time I go to run it, even in the highest level account, which would be the system account in Windows XP, it still will not work, which is very annoying. So I wish I could update the BIOS and see if it actually adds USB booting support, but I haven't been able to get there yet. This thing also has a very limited and primitive accelerometer. So if I were to take the display and fold it all the way back, it does automatically change the display orientation to a different orientation, which in this case is defaulted to portrait. And you could then open up the journal, and there you go, you have your journal. But of course, you can just change the orientation. It's not really working, is it? I think it needs to be on the desktop in order for that to function, isn't it? Yeah. That cheesy sound effect. Yeah. This glare is not helping out the video. I'll just do it here. So, see how accurate my very, very terrible, admittedly, handwriting is. Oops. Yeah, it does tend to be a little laggy on battery power. I'm not gonna lie. There's the infamous hello thing that was done with the original Macintosh. See, I told you my handwriting is terrible. But it does actually seem to work, and if I do the eraser, if I put it back on the pen tool, it does use the back end of this as an eraser, since this is a supported application. So that part of it does seem to work rather well. So you get the idea. And I believe this is a pressure-sensitive eraser, so the harder that you press on the eraser, the thicker of an area it will erase. I don't think the journal has that support. It only has just the basic eraser support. Otherwise, like I said, I don't really have too much on here. There is the sticky notes application, which was only in XP Tablet PC Edition, and these also have support for voice memos as well, so we can go ahead and record something. This does have a built-in microphone, I believe, and I have never tried it, so let's see if it does anything. Testing the microphone on this Toshiba Portege M200. Hopefully the video hasn't been too crap. I've been kind of out of it for making videos, but hopefully this will suffice. I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things here pretty quick. We'll see. Alright, let's see how it works. Testing the microphone on this Toshiba That's a little on the crappy side, but hey, I can't fault it. It does work. So, credit where credit is due. Yeah, I wish I had some more software that I have on hand to actually demonstrate the capabilities of this thing, because I really would love to try to do some things with this, since it is running a fairly capable stylus, and it runs really well on XP, since that was what it was designed for, of course. Anyway, so let's see what we have in here as far as stuff in Device Manager is concerned. As you can see, there is the display adapter, once again, a GeForce FX Go 5200. This has a Toshiba 30 gig gas line hard drive in it. That's what I had lying around. I don't believe this would have shipped with this machine when it was new. Maybe a similar model like a 20 gig or even an upgraded 40 gig would have probably been ideal for a machine such as this. As I mentioned, there is the infrared module. This has an Intel Ultra ATA storage controller. And this has a Wacom digitizer. Nice. That's what I figured. I figured it was something like Wacom because it does not require the use of any power. It just works, which is very nice. So, Wacom stylus it is. Nice. It just has a WIN modem. Nothing fancy, but by the time this machine would have been out, a modem would have probably been done through Windows anyway. This is not a Centrino machine, so it has Atheros Wi-Fi. That's kind of a dead giveaway, though, why there's no Centrino case badge. I believe one of the junk units I have actually has a Centrino Wi-Fi card in it, so I might rip it out and put it into this and unofficially make this a Centrino machine for better battery life. Haven't decided yet. There is the Toshiba card bus capable Pcmcia slot. There is the Pentium M running at 1.6 gigahertz. Has a Toshiba SD card controller. Toshiba primarily, I guess, put their name on a bunch of the components throughout this computer. Of course, like I mentioned, the only exceptions were the Wi-Fi card, the display adapter, and the digitizer. But otherwise, a lot of the stuff is branded by Toshiba. As you can see, the USB 2.0 controller provided by the chipset. And there's all of the lovely devices. So, very cool. And down here, this is the Toshiba energy saver function of this machine, which controls the performance very aggressively based on what you're doing or how the machine is configured. By default, when you're off the plug, it uses this normal profile, but when you're plugged in, it uses full power. And you might have been noticing that the screen has a little bit of artifacting going on sometimes whenever I'm moving things around or I'm closing windows, and that's part of the power saving functions of this laptop to give it better battery life, despite the fact that this one does not have a Centrino capable like sticker or any kind of Intel wireless card. And battery life's actually been pretty decent for how old this battery is. Presumably this is a replacement, since I don't believe the original would have been in here. This was at my institution, and of course college computers, primarily ones used by staff, are used very heavily or sometimes very lightly, but I don't think that this machine would have been used very lightly. Either that or this would have probably been used either in the medical program that we have or the automotive program that we have. I believe this would have probably been in the medical program just because their workloads aren't nearly as intensive as automotive, and they would still need to have the use of one of these things particularly. And I don't know what they use nowadays. They either probably use iPads or they use a more modern tablet convertible running Windows 10. But I don't know. I'm not taking that program, so I couldn't be able to tell you. But yeah, whatever battery this thing has in it and whatever software that Toshiba is implying, it seems to get pretty decent battery life for how old this battery really is. It's kind of impressive. So other than that, these buttons, well, they're not going to do anything on the desktop. This is mainly just used for like scrolling or moving around interface elements to select something with this little joystick. So we'll just go ahead and put it back into its laptop mode, or primarily its laptop mode. It's a little stiff, so it's not exactly ideal to do it with one hand, but it does work. And you can still use the stylus in this mode, of course, and access those buttons. So other than that, I wish I had some more software to put on this machine to demonstrate its capabilities, like for the example of the graphics card, you could try some games, but unfortunately, it's very difficult to get Steam working on XP well, it's not exactly difficult, at least not right now. It's not that difficult, but, you know, for a machine like this, it's probably not worth it. And for that matter, it doesn't have a CD drive, and I don't have an external one on hand to install anything with, so it just doesn't really give me a whole heck of a lot of choice to install stuff with. So I at least wanted to demonstrate what this machine would have came with Toshiba when it was new, minus maybe Microsoft Office and some other useful programs or games or whatever. I mean, we can demonstrate one, and that would be in Windows. It'd just be the standard Solitaire game, which it does work for Solitaire, as everybody probably would expect this thing to. So this can be used for playing a game of Solitaire, and it works really well for that. So I mean, hey, you got your intended use for this thing right here. So not bad, I guess. But we're not going to sit here and play a game of Solitaire. That's just going to take too long. So I think that's it for this video. I don't have anything else to really say, so that's it. Appreciate you all coming to watch, and I will see you later.